Well, hello, friends, and welcome to Boston.com's Cocktail Club. I'm Jackson Cannon, and tonight I'll be joined by Mezcal evangelist Misty Kalkofen. Tonight we're making drinks with Mezcal, catching up on the local bar and restaurant scene, and of course, sharing some tips pros use to make great drinks at home. I'm going to go through everything we need for tonight, and all the while we are taking your questions from the chat. First drink up is going to be Funky Jesus's Naked and Famous. This is a Quattro of 4 ingredients, all right? I'm going to use Chichicapa as the Del Maguey expression of Mezcal for mine, along with Aperol, yellow Chartreuse, and a little fresh lime juice that I squeezed just about 20 minutes ago. And for Cloud People, an original of Misty's that's a riff off of a classic, you're going to need 2 ounces of Mezcal, and you'll need a little dry vermouth, as well as being able to use the yellow Chartreuse again with some dashes of orange bitters, and you're going to want to finish that with a lemon twist. Don't need really fancy ice, just the cubed ice that we get from these little 15 cube trays, close to a 1x1, pretty solid, really good for both the shaking and the stirring tonight. Going to go up into kind of classic cocktail cups. You can do whatever your favorite glass is. For the Naked and Famous, I love a coupe. It's always how I've always had that drink. It's nice and wide and open, and we'll get a great kind of wash line across the top, and we'll be able to dive into the coupe. For Misty's drink, I chose a Nick and Nora. It's a little bit more of a precious glass. This is a delicate spin. I might have a little trouble getting it all in there with much of a collar, so I'll probably go in and out on my lemon twist, but I just think that's going to be a really elegant way to enjoy that drink. And I'm going to start, just put a little ice in my glass for right now, which you can do too, so that they'll be chilling all the while, that when we go to make those drinks, they've got a little bit of a chill on them. So when you get to the last sip, it won't be as warm as it would be if you didn't. Okay, other tools, of course, we're going to shake that Naked and Famous. I love to use a cocktail shaker for that. But you can use like a mason jar if it has a lid. Snap a quart container from a to-go soup or something like that if you don't have anything else handy, so that you can vigorously shake that drink. And then anything that's kind of wide enough and open enough to stir the Cloud People in and then pour it into your glass. I'm going to use a nice fancy mixing glass for that with a long handled bar spoon. I just find that it's a really elegant way to get all of those ingredients incorporated, get some dilution in there, and get that drink chilled down without exciting it too much. For measuring, I'm going to use a couple of jiggers, but if you don't have that, you can use a classic teaspoon. Everybody has one in their house. Teaspoon is half an ounce. So when it comes to 2 ounces, that's real easy. It's 4 teaspoons. If you're trying to make 3/4 of an ounce, which we need to do on the first one, that's a teaspoon and a half. That's a little more difficult unless you have that half teaspoon handy. Then it's like boom, boom, and you're good. Of course, that's an equal parts drink too. So if you have to, you can always make it a little smaller, a little larger, depending on your needs. I've got a peeler to make the garnish for the Cloud People, and a knife if I wanted to trim that up. That's about all I think we need. Okay. Misty Kalkofen first stepped behind the bar while studying theology at Harvard's Divinity School, and credits local legend Brother Cleve with cementing her interest in cocktails. On the opening team of seminal cocktail bar, the B-Side Lounge, she has held forth at bars including Green Street, Brick and Mortar, and Drink. In 2013, Misty joined the family of Del Maguey Single Village Mezcal. In her role as the madrina, she acts as a cultural liaison between the Del Maguey family of producers in Oaxaca and the U.S. hospitality community through hands-on immersion educational experiences. She has been featured in Bon Appetit, Imbibe, Food and Wine Cocktail Editions, the Wall Street Journal, the Boston Globe, and many other publications. Recognized at the prestigious Spirited Awards at Tales of the Cocktail numerous times, she was awarded American Brand Ambassador of the Year for 2017. In 2018, she co-authored Drinking Like Ladies with Kirsten Aman, and they launched a podcast of the same name. Misty has spent 20 years honing her craft and palate and has a reputation as one of Boston's foremost authorities on cocktail history and culture. Cultivating a communal spirit among cocktail lovers while showing everyone a really good time in the process is her mission across the many communities she touches. Misty, it is an honor to have you here. I'm so glad you could join us. Welcome to Cocktail Club.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, this is such a treat, drinking Mezcal with Misty. I am living the life. Hey, for bartenders, we've done traditionally, we've put out a tip jar so people would hit their Venmo up to show their support. You've chosen a charity. Can you tell us a little bit about that before we get started?
Yeah, I would love to. So the charity I chose is called Another Round, Another Rally. They are relatively new. Auspiciously, they launched right before the pandemic hit. The charity itself has two kind of sides to it. One is to be kind of a financial help to people in the hospitality industry. The intention was, of course, in times when there were unexpected events that were happening, for example, perhaps a health emergency for a bartender or service industry person who didn't have health insurance. But of course, the pandemic hit and quickly they mustered 200 volunteers and started raising funds. And over the course of the pandemic have distributed several $1 million in grants to hospitality professionals, whether it's through just physical grants themselves or grocery carts for groceries. And they really are focusing on serving communities that have been underserved within our industry previously. There's also an educational aspect, creating more equity within education within the hospitality community. It's a really beautiful organization founded by my good friends Amanda Gunderson and Travis Nass. So if you have a few dollars to spare, I would really appreciate if you could support them.
Well, that's awesome. We'll drop that link back in the chat periodically during our session. And thank you so much for doing that. What else have you been seeing in the local scene these days? What's going on in the bars that you like to hit up?
Oh man, I love the fact that when I go into my local, there's not always a seat anymore.
Right?
Oh, it's like the one thing that
It's like, oh, I'll stand, you know.
I want there to be a seat. And now I'm kind of like, I don't want there to be a seat. I want it to be so full that I have to wait for my bar stool, and it's really amazing to feel that energy coming back into the city. And so that, that has been super exciting for me to see here in Boston and in my travels as well. And I have so much respect for all of the people that have been out there just persevering through this time. And so it's been, it's really amazing to see. And also just the way that the larger community, as far as guests, have been really rallying around the hospitality community. And so I'm being patient. It's been a challenging time in a lot of ways, but loyal. And so that's been really cool. And so it's amazing to feel that energy again in the city.
Well, it's awesome. I was checking in with our friend Joaquin Simo from New York, and I was literally checking a detail about this drink to make sure I had the story the way that I wanted it, I think is the best way to explain what I was doing. But I had to be like, oh, pouring ribbons is open, right? Because I just don't know what is and what isn't. And I was just very glad to hear that it was. Hey, should we make his cocktail while we're chit-chatting, and that way we can have something in front of us and then we can get into more and more things. So this is Naked and Famous. I mean, I want to ask you more about it, but he mentioned a recent visit that you made to where this drink was made. But so without getting too far into it, we're going to try and get as far into it as we can in the time that we have. I'm going to be using Del Maguey's Chichicapa. This is an expression that kind of does have that element that I think is a little overhyped in the category itself. That little bit of smoke and rough road that I think is so evocative. But it's like I'm afraid to say it sometimes because people, the mezcal I have sitting next to it from a different family brought in under your umbrella is so fruity and delicate and airy by comparison. But I'm going to start with 3/4 of an ounce. I think I might be going. Look who's going tablespoons tonight. Little simpatico. I guess my jiggers are in the laundry. So I'm going to do 1.5 tablespoons, which is going to be fun, of mezcal. And this is, again, the Chichicapa, which is, it's just beautiful. It does have so much fruit and balance and herbaceousness to it as well as that.
Oh, So good.
Yeah. And then I'm going to do equal parts. And you had a great point, about this drink. Remember, it's equal parts, friends. Whatever you're using to measure, just make sure you measure the same. I'm going to put chartreuse in next. I'm going to kind of try and use my lime juice to sort of clean up my measuring tools when I get through the line here. So next, I'm going to do the chartreuse. Same amount, 3/4 of an ounce or tablespoon and a half. Just watching me fumble, you can see why we do use different tools when we can. And then same with Aperol. And I got a lot of questions about Aperol. I don't really feel comfortable subbing for it. It is a very specific Italian aperitivo. People compare it to Campari, but it is lighter, sweeter, and just a little bit different in terms of its flavor profile. And then last, but by no means least, an equal measure of fresh lime juice. And when a Quattro really works, there's a dozen of them that are just beyond compare. This this doesn't end up like a daiquiri, doesn't end up like some of those other sours. It takes the citrus down kind of to the other ingredients, and more of a 3-to-1, right, than a 2-to-1 to the basic ingredient. And so lets all the complexities of all the different ingredients kind of hammer out. We're going to shake that vigorously.
I'm using my favorite ice scoop when I'm at home by myself, also known as my fingers.
Nice. Nothing like cocktails for one. Oh, we're getting hammered with the difference between yellow and green chartreuse. I'm going to get to in a second, but let's shake it. Chartreuse is that great elixir by the Carthusian monks, the only liqueur for which a color is named. That's for green chartreuse. Hundreds of different herbs and botanicals in that expression, about half that many, but still quite complex in the yellow, a little less sugar and a little less alcohol in the yellow as well. So sometimes for shorthand, and this isn't, obviously there's many drinks that utilize them in different ways, but we like to stir or shake with the yellow, and we sometimes like to shoot the green straight. So.
Although there's another great Quattro cocktail with the green, of course, the last word.
The last word was the first important note on the subject, right? So.
Yes, and also a cocktail that you can sub mezcal in instead of the gin, and it's lovely.
Yeah, there are a lot of places that mezcal goes in very elegantly, not just for sub for tequila, which I think is really logical for people to make because they're spirits from the same area, but for lots of things that use gin or light rum, mezcal comes in with its own perspective. It plays nice with lots of different kinds of ingredients. Let's take a sip of Joaquin's Naked and Famous, what everyone wants to be, from Tricky. Oh,
So after all these years.
That is a delight. It's fun. I was reading through Imbibe, and I saw a great profile on a Nigerian-born, Atlanta-raised bartender who's really coming on the scene, and she was just highlighting it as her favorite drink right now. And I was like, that's so cool that a drink like that can live through these different periods of time. And soon it'll just be called a classic. It won't be called a modern classic after
classics, yeah.
After a bit more time,
Maybe it means that we're old, Jackson, but it's cool to see.
I only called Brother Cleve a legend. I tried to stay away from that label on us, Miss. So one of our advanced questions was, I didn't tell you this, but it's from Don, and he says, we're going to Death and Company in January. That's the bar where Joaquin created this drink. Joaquin owns a bar called Pouring Ribbons Down. And Don wants to know what they should order. And it just made me think of the story that Joaquin told me, sight unseen. I'm just going to have you tell the story of the two Naked and Famouses, if you would,
Wait a second, which story?
about ordering them with the different spirits.
Oh.
And blind tasting everybody, kind of to prove that Chichicapa is the king among princes in this one,
I mean, the the story is lost in the cobwebs of mezcal. But the point of this story is a really good one, is that in that all mezcal is not created equal, and even two wonderfully made mezcals are going to have two really remarkably different effects in a cocktail, and so and we'll talk about this more when I build the second cocktail, because it's a great recipe where you can do some tweaking depending upon the mezcal that you have in your home, because I think it more than any other recipes, when you're working with mezcal, if you can't find the mezcal that is recommended by the person who created the cocktail, you have to be willing to make some tweaks in order to be able to make sure it's something that you're going to enjoy. Because the flavor profiles of mezcal can go from very, very dry and earthy and green up to very sweet and roasty and earthy. And so you have to remember that. And be willing to play around a little bit. Use your recipe as a guide, not a Bible.
There you go. I like that. So, for kind of finding spirits that you can trust, it's been wonderful for me that I've also been able to connect to the source through a trip from you all to Oaxaca and meet some of the families and see the expressions. And I always called it the green wall when we kind of like would be building up the collection somewhere. And you and I have chatted about that before. And I've said it to many people, like, look at these labels, they're highly distinctive. This packaging isn't a gimmick. These are all radically different expressions. It's like 12 to 15 to 20 different bottlings you can trust. And you can trust that the community they come from benefit. And you can trust that, that the business being done here is whole, and wholesome. And so, but to people who beyond that are looking for that, I took a couple of questions asking, how can I know like how to trust? Because I hear so much about Mexican spirits being like some of them done right, some of them not so much for the communities. How can I trust that and know that they're one that are supported by their communities?
Well, first of all, I really appreciate that question, because it's super important, especially as the category is growing. I think that, as consumers, a lot of times we rely on the bars that we go to guide us, the bars that we is really important. And that's always a great conversation to have with a bartender that you love and is knowledgeable about the spirits that they're pouring. But to a certain degree, as we become more adventurous on our own, the onus lies on us to make sure we're making good purchasing decisions. And so I really, really appreciate that as a question. One of the things that I think is really important is looking for how transparent the brand is around who is making the product, where it is being made, and what the process is. All of the brands that I really appreciate that have happened within the last 10 years or so, their labels are very prescriptive around everything from, in some cases, in some tequilas, to the type of yeast that they're using if they're inoculating, and they know exactly what it is, but really transparent about what their process is. We started as a brand in 1995, and we decided to keep our labels the way that they were, but all of that information is available on our website for anybody who wants to find it. We felt like our labels say something about our history, and so it's really important for us to kind of keep them in that way. But we wanted to make sure all of that information was available. And so I think brands that are very forthcoming about their activities and who they're working with and what the process is, that is a very clear signal that they're working in the right way, that the right people are getting credit for the work, the actual physical work that's being done. And so first and foremost, that is a big one.
Are there any resources or sites that people can also check out beyond your website for information in the broader category?
Definitely. My favorite is called Mezcalistas. It's run by my friend Susan Koss, and it's a great resource whether you're in the trade or if you are a consumer and just an enthusiast. They have everything from a very simple, glossary to explain some of the terms. So as you're doing a little bit of your own research, you can know a little bit more about process and what all of the specific terms mean. They do some reviews as well, but a lot of really great blog content. So you can go as deep as you want to, if there's something about regulations around mezcal that maybe you're not as interested in, but a bartender may be interested in, you can skip that. But there's a lot of things that are really important, especially if you're trying to find the brands that are doing it right. They really dig in. They're not associated with any brand. And so they're coming from a perspective, an equal playing field, right? They're looking at it as somebody who's just concerned about the quality and the category itself. And so that, I think, is the best resource that is out there right now.
Awesome. Well, our friend behind the scenes, Ariana, dropped that in the chat for everyone I see. I also see a great question for you, Misty. I'm headed to Oaxaca. Bar recommendations, please.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. Okay. So let me grab a seat. So one of my favorite spots for cocktails is a restaurant called Sabina Sabe. Sabina, and second word, Sabe. Wonderful food as well, but really great cocktails and a really chill vibe. There's a fancier style of cocktail bar that's called Selva. Selva, really high touch, beautiful cocktails that they are making. Of course, there's wonderful mezcalerias. My favorite is called In Situ from Maestro Ulises. And that's just kind of the mecca, like that's where you go. They have probably over 100 different mezcals that they offer under the In Situ label for you to try. You can do flights. It's an amazing educational experience between Ulysses and his partner Sandra. So that's definitely a go-to.
Awesome. Well, should we make another drink?
Are you thirsty?
I am. I want to save a sip of this, but I really want to try this other drink before I house this one.
We're going from bright and refreshing to strong and stirred, right?
I'm with you.
So this cocktail is called the Cloud People, and it's in reference to a name for one of the indigenous groups of Oaxaca, the Zapotecs, and so they are known as the Cloud People. And that's one of the largest indigenous groups in Oaxaca, and most of the producers that we work with are part of that indigenous group. And it is a riff, a mezcal version of one of my favorite classic cocktails, the Puritan. So the Puritan is, I love gin martinis. And I was looking for a variation on gin martini. I tried the Alaska, which is a gin martini, but instead of using vermouth, using yellow chartreuse as the modifying ingredient. And I always loved the first sip when it was really cold. And then as it started warming up, it would get really sweet and cloying, and I never wanted to finish it. So when I found this recipe for the Puritan, it was an amazing aha moment, because it's like if a gin martini and an Alaska had the perfect little child, using yellow chartreuse rather than like 3/4 of an ounce like in an Alaska, but as just a little bit of a modifier. So traditionally with the gin, it would be 2 ounces of gin, 3/4 of an ounce of dry vermouth, and 1/4 ounce of yellow chartreuse. We're going to tweak those proportions a little bit. We're going to do a classic drink proportion. We used to...
It's the other golden number,
We like to call it the wonderful 2 half, and there are definitely bartenders that used to work at Drink who have that tattooed on their arms. So we're going to start with actually some orange bitters. Let's get that in there first, just in case something goes awry. I'm using Angostura orange, but I think you have the Reagan's orange.
I've got some Reagan's, yeah.
Yeah, which is a little bit more clovey and spicy. Doesn't matter. It's all going to be delicious. I'm gonna go extra light because I want a couple of drops, but it is a pretty powerful bitter. Yeah, and I'm just gonna do 1 dash here. We can always tweak, like I said, So then 2 half. Let's start with our Dolan dry vermouth, one of my favorite dry vermouths from the Halcel Pens company. They do really beautiful stuff, and we're gonna start with a 1/2 ounce here. How many tablespoons is a 1/2 ounce?
That's 1 tablespoon. Just keeping score at home.
And then we're gonna go back to our yellow chartreuse, which we used in the Naked and Famous, and we're gonna do a 1/2 ounce here as well. Now, as we're starting to think about tweaking, just remember that your dry vermouth is gonna help you to take away some sweetness. Your yellow chartreuse is gonna help you to add some. So if you're tasting this before you pour it out and you wanna tweak it one way or another, that's kind of the directions you're gonna be going. And I'm gonna be using Vida De Muertos for my mezcal,
Exciting.
which is the most recent mezcal that we launched. It just came out in July, but I saw that you just grabbed the Santo Domingo, which is
I have an open bottle of Santo Domingo Alvarado.
which is the this cocktail. That is a very, very, very good choice.
Yeah. Well, this is flavor profile wise, I've always been just impressed by all of the kind of like semi-tropical fruit notes that come from this high altitude expression. Really delicate sense of like just kind of banana and apple and like a hint of lime, and it's just gorgeous,
Beautiful florals. So for substituting in mezcal for a different base spirit, it's important to think about the flavor notes that kind of cross over, right? And so when you think about gin, you think about kind of those floral and botanical notes that are there. And so Santo Domingo is a really great selection when you're substituting in a classic cocktail into a classic cocktail structure for gin. I'm doing the Vida de Muertos, which is from San Luis del Rio. It has some really beautiful tropical and floral notes as well, but also a little bit of green, like poblano pepper or something like that. And so there was 2 ounces of the Vida de Muertos. And now let's get some ice in there and start our stirring. My favorite. All right. Hope I remember how to stir. It's been a while.
Friends, look how artfully she's doing that. You notice that the ice is just going around as kind of like one thing. It's this is a funny thing when you teach drink making. Of all the things, this is harder than shaking. Shaking you have a context for, and it takes people a while to realize that this is about doing a little less.
Yeah.
And just waiting to make it happen. Really, just really quickly, a couple of questions on that, and why are we doing that? Well, we wanted those delightful popping air bubbles in our drink made with citrus. In our straight spirit drink, we don't want those. We want the velvety texture. That whole idea of where that phrase "pouring ribbons" comes from, to name a bar, like, hey man, how's your night? It's great, nothing but pouring ribbons. Because when you've stirred a drink like this a certain way and you go to pour it, it stays together. It doesn't slosh out. It pours down the shaft like a ribbon, and it's that's when you've got that well-textured martini, etc. So
that enjoying a beautiful cocktail or a plate of food, it's more than just what it tastes like. There's we use all of our senses to enjoy, whether we're talking food or beverage, and so the texture is equally as important as the temperature of the drink or the actual flavors of the drink itself. And that's why we chill our glassware, because when our fingers touch the glassware, it tells us something about how the drink has been prepared. And all of these things that are so important, we really enjoy our cocktails with all of our senses, whether we realize it or not. So I just gave mine a little taste and I'm super happy with it. But if you feel like your cocktail is too dry, you can add a little bit more of that yellow chartreuse. If you feel it's gone a little bit too sweet, or you could add a little bit more bitters as well. If you feel it's gone too sweet, you can add a little bitters or a little bit of the Dolan dry vermouth. I'm pretty happy with my 2 half here, so I'm gonna go ahead and pour mine out. Did 2 half work with the Santo Domingo?
It's gorgeous. I feel like it's gonna really love that. The spritz of the lemon.
Yeah,
is going to change that little bit of heaviness.
Yeah, it's super important to remember that the lemon and grapefruit dry things out as you're twisting over them. If you're twisting with orange, it's probably going to sweeten it a little bit. And so that's always important to think about.
And then just for friends at home, we're being careful to take a fresh piece of lemon. The pith side, we're going to point towards ourselves, the skin side down when we go to spritz.
And like you, my glass is kind of small, so I am not going to put my twist in, but I am going to rub the twist around the lip of the glass, so I get there as well.
Hey, I quickly wanted to address that. It looks like from the chat that we're having a hard time getting to that Venmo link. We're going to drop a link to the website for the charity in, so hopefully you guys can pick that up and go out directly to their website and link to them there, because it's a really worthy cause, and we want to make sure that you have a chance to find them if you're interested.
Awesome, thank you.
Cheers.
Salud. Oh yeah, I'm not mad at that.
Wow. Well, yeah, I know you chose the name for kind of profound and sentimental reasons, but it really kind of, you feel like you're in the clouds when you take a sip of this. No lie, it's if all the different parts are preparing you for the experience, that name gets you ready for just that kind of airy feeling with that.
Especially for you with Santo Domingo, because that village is nestled in that cloud forest up in the mountains on the edge of the.
It so is. I went there on a trip without you, but I thought of you there. You know, it was clearly like a place that, I mean, there's a picture of you there, and and I was like, oh my God, of course, you know. And the story behind that, I actually think people would be interested in knowing, if we can tell it briefly, about the young lady from that family who was able to go to school and come back to that village.
Oh, so Esther, when Ron first met Esperidion and his family, you know, no one had gone to college at that point in time. Ron tells the story that the first time he was there, the women actually, when they were sitting down to eat, sat at a separate table and everything. And over the years, as things progressed, Esperidion has always been extremely dedicated to education. But through his work with Domingo, he was able to send one of his daughters to school, to college in Oaxaca, and actually sent her sister down with her to help her around the house and for cooking and everything, so she could focus on her studies. And so his daughter was the first person in the village to go to college. She's actually now a lawyer, and
Right.
With some of the aspects of the community of producers that we have, and they can work to get government grants together and things like that. And so she helps us with things of that nature. But it's really cool to see kind of these dreams around education realized for him, and especially to have it, you know, the first opportunity be one of his daughters, which is extremely uncommon. Usually it's the sons who have those opportunities. And so he's very proud around that. He's very, very proud, and obviously everybody in the family is. But it's one of the really wonderful ways that the growth of a category like mezcal can result in amazing opportunities.
Yeah, that's just fantastic, and thanks for sharing that. We are running out of time. I have a couple things we have to say, but then I would love it if you'd lead us in a little bit of toast afterwards. As I usually say, that's all the time we have for Cocktail Club. Thank you all so much for being here. Please follow us at Globe Events on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter for more info about upcoming Boston.com Cocktail Club events. You can find me on all those platforms as well by searching for @CannonJax. We're off the next couple of weeks. Back in December, a very special guest. Very special thanks to you, Misty. Really, really, really great to have you here. We were honored by your presence. And would you take us out with a traditional blessing and a sip of mezcal?
Yeah, of course. So as I said, most of our producers that we work with are from the indigenous group, the Zapotecs, and speak Zapotec as their first language. And so the toast that we share with them, and it's a little bit different from village to village because of dialects, but we'll go with the most basic of the toasts. The word is Digibeo or Digibe, depending upon where you are. And the word is kind of all encompassing to kind of a toast to one another, but also to the planet, the life of the planet, Mother Earth, and all of the beings around us. And so it's a really beautiful recognition of all of the energy that we share and one another, whether no matter what kingdom we're in, right? So,
Awesome.
and usually there's a little cross on the grounds that we would share, honoring Mother Earth and our ancestors before, and then Stichibeyu.
Stichibeyu.